My name is Jacob Warren. Welcome to this lesson on chopping for the double bass. Today we're going to talk about chop stroke placement. This lesson is going to be an expansion on a topic that I brushed over in the very first chopping video about the basic chop stroke, and that has to do with where we actually place the chop stroke on the instrument and what effect that has on the overall sound. One of the main challenges I find of chopping on double bass is that unlike violin or cello, we don't have as many high overtones in our chop stroke, which makes it difficult for us to cut through an ensemble. So the more we understand placement, we can use those principles to help us create a chop stroke sound that can really cut through an ensemble. I'm just going to start off by doing a little experiment where I'll play on my top two strings a bunch of chop strokes, each one getting progressively closer to the bridge, and we'll just listen to what they sound like. So as my bow gets closer to the bridge, you'll notice that there are more high overtones in the chop stroke sound. It's also easier to play with more force because as we get closer to the bridge, there's actually more tension in the string. We can see this by trying to pull the string in the middle and it having a fair amount of give, and then trying to do the same thing down by the bridge and not being able to move it much. So that inability to be moved actually helps us by allowing us to place a bit more force through our chop stroke, getting a louder sound, and also getting a sound with more overtones in it. Cutting through an ensemble, though, is not always the goal that we have when we're chopping. There's actually a tune that my quartet Westbound Situation plays called Neif, where the bass takes the chopping role. And that's something that is kind of rare for us to do in that ensemble because our violinist, Grant, and our cellist, Zach, are great chopping musicians, and usually it makes a lot of sense for those instruments to carry the rhythmic part. We also have a mandolin player, Jake Howard, and mandolin chop is actually the inspiration for why bowed string players invented chopping in the first place. So usually there are a lot of good options for who can carry the percussive part in that ensemble. In this particular case, in this tune, we chose the bass because of the timbre that only the bass can have when chopping. So in this section, there isn't a lot of other stuff for me to cut through. It's actually kind of a breakdown section, and we wanted a lot of those warmer timbres to shine through. So I decided to do the chop stroke on my low strings to try and get some more of those low sounds and less of those high overtones. I'll play a little bit of that tune now so you can hear what I'm talking about. This is Neif. So now that we heard a little bit of that tune, let's do another experiment, and I'm going to play a chop stroke on the high two strings, and then I'm going to play some chop strokes on the low two strings so we can compare without all the other musical stuff going on, just to see how they sound back to back. So these are my high strings, and these are my low strings. So it's a little subtle, but to my ear, you can hear on the lower strings that there's just less of those high overtones and a little bit more of the thud sound, those low pitches in the chop stroke, which is what we wanted for that particular part of the tune. So understanding how different placements, whether it be relative to the bridge or which strings you play on, affect the timbre of your chop stroke can provide a lot of dimension to your grooves. And I think there's a really simple groove that can kind of illustrate what all of these different effects are doing for the chop stroke. So just a simple boom chuck groove where I'm trying to imitate a drum kit. So if there was a drum kit playing just, kick drum on 1, and then some filler stuff, and then there's strong beat on 2, kick drum on 3, strong beat on 4. So we'll have the low kick drums on 1s and 3s, and basically the snare drum or the high overtones on the 2s and 4s. If I'm trying to imitate that on bass, I'm going to choose to put my kick drum stroke, my 1s and 3s, on my low 2 strings, and try to find a type of chop stroke that gives me more of the thud and less of the overtones. So I'm not going to be as close to the bridge, and I might not even set my bow down this way as much. I might just be setting it to the side, going for those low overtones. And then I'm going to choose something way backed off on the bridge to fill in between. And then my snare hit, my 2 and my 4, are going to be right up by the bridge to get those high overtones. So altogether, it sounds like this. So now, as an experiment, I'm going to do the same bow placements, but I'm going to take away the fact that I'm changing which strings I'm playing on. So that sounds like this. And now back to the old version where I'm adding some of those string changes in. So you can definitely hear that the version that all stays on the high 2 strings does not have as much dimension as the one where I'm actually going to the low strings for my 1 and my 3. Understanding the role that placement plays in creating different timbres with your chop stroke can be really, really beneficial to just making your grooves that much more impactful to a listener, and are just really important for making chopping work on our instrument, I think. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on chop placement for the double bass, and stay tuned for more videos. I also recently launched a Patreon page where you can support me in making more of these videos. If that's something you'd be interested in doing, please check out the link in the description below. There's lots of fun stuff over there, and we are planning on doing monthly workshops where we get together on Zoom to talk about bass, anything you're interested in. So thanks so much, and stay tuned for more.